Look, my friends. Behold the scene of our next great adventure.
Dawntrail was a mislead. As a story, it was boring to experience, sparse in its gameplay, and childish in its themes.
Listen, man, I'm tired of trying to be positive for this game. Like, right now, we're in deep shit. The graph is going down, brother.
Dawntrail is by far the weakest of all iterations of Final Fantasy XIV.
The issue is that it's so fucking boring!
Sweet mother of holy hell. Never in the history of gaming has anything so successfully driven me comatose.
This song is fucking awful.
So, with that said, how much do I like Wut Lmao? Well, not much, sadly.
I'd rate the main story a 4 out of 10 at best.
But where are we gonna find her?
Dragonage the Veilguard is a colossal disappointment. I really can't put it any other way. Every interaction between the companions feels like HR is in the room, and every interaction led by the main character, Rook, sounds like he's addressing an under-12 soccer team before a semi-final, or teaching toddlers how to properly share toys.
If you've never played Dragonage the Veilguard or Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, well, don't worry. This isn't a review, and you don't need to be familiar with either one. I will be discussing spoilers very lightly in terms of a few background examples, but I'm not going to be going into detail on any of them in particular. Now, just imagine this. A series that you are a longtime fan of is returning, or it's been renewed for another season. The only catch is, everyone who was in charge of making it has been moved off to another project. They've been replaced by everyone that was working just beneath them, and those people, well, they've got a bit of a roadmap left behind by the original creatives. That's probably the best case scenario, right? When Kentaro Miura died suddenly in 2021, what was to become of Berserk? Was it just to end abruptly, unfinished? Ultimately, his friend agreed to continue the manga to completion, trying to follow to the letter what Miura had described and written. The next Song of Ice and Fire clearly is not getting done before old Georgie makes his way up to those big pearly gates, but should someone else try to cobble an ending together? It didn't work out too hot for the last people who tried to do that. As time goes on, the people who made old beloved classics are just getting out of the business. Some retire, some get fired, some get promoted to irrelevancy, some die, and some start embarrassingly rambling in really weird ways on Twitter. And this has always been part of the medium, same as it is anywhere else that you have long-running franchises and series. That's what makes these two games so noteworthy to me. They were made by the best possible replacements. Both of these games were made by veterans of the series, minus just a few at the top. That seems like it's a pattern that we're going to see more of. A changing of the times, a passing of the torch, and a cycling of generations. In decades past, it felt like there was a pretty good chance that, with new hands at the helm, the series would be driven towards something exciting and interesting. But these days, it just feels kind of different. Maybe that's because both of these games bombed horribly. I personally suffered through Dawntrail, and it was one of the most enraging things I have ever sat through.
All the best parts of our journey so far.
What best parts? There hasn't even been a good one.
And I was enchanted by Veilguard, so I watched playthrough after playthrough. The script was just so confused.
Well, wasn't expecting to fight an ogre today. Then again, I also didn't expect to learn that my gods are rampaging around and trying to end the world. Just one of those days.
In both cases, questions kept popping to my mind. How in the world did this happen? Why were so many incompetent people put into these lead positions? And why were so many people working for so long on franchises that they clearly did not like at all? I think the answer is a mix of a few things. It's an over-reliance on institutional knowledge, it's the quiet proliferation of business idiots, and it's a generational sea change when it comes to attracting new talent. And I feel that's all hardly unique to either of these two companies or even to the gaming industry as a whole. Institutional knowledge is pretty straightforward. It's the idea that as people work for your company retains a certain amount of information even if those people should leave. Much of this is, pretty obvious. Did you write some documentation, create an engine, or create some assets? All of that, properly employed, makes your business more efficient. People can reference them and use them for other projects. But there's also a more dogmatic interpretation of institutional knowledge, and this is really the troublesome one. If you've worked for a corporation, or frankly just in a group for a class, you know that it's abundantly obvious that it tends to just be a few people that are really putting in most of the effort. The corporate line of thinking goes, and corporate thinking is basically just business religion, people who put in effort, well, they rub that talent off onto others. So you can attach a hard worker to a group of underperformers, and they will naturally work harder. The problem is that what is actually happening in those cases is that the hard workers are hauling ass, and they're covering up for all the slackers. It doesn't matter as such if the people who wrote Veilguard and Dawntrail had been contributing to the series for years, if it was the case that their middling work was being filtered through a competent editor overlooking everything. Because someone is covering up for the underperformers don't get canned. When a project comes out that succeeds despite a high staffing of those underperformers, the idea of trickle-down talent, well, seemingly it gets vindicated. And so corporations repeat the tactic over and over, and you get left with a ton of teams that are all idiots except for one person, but more on that later. There's also the simple fact that even if someone does leave behind institutional knowledge, it really doesn't matter if their descendants don't even make use of it. Settings and stories themselves are a form of institutional knowledge, if you think about it, but Veilguard retcons a ton of Dragon Age lore. I guess it was because the team thought that they could do better? In some cases, you aren't even getting just a deviation away from that accumulated institutional knowledge, you're getting a full-on regression. Final Fantasy XIV's main story is told basically like a visual novel. There's lots of text, some of which is voiced, over a backdrop of reused character, location, and soundtrack assets. In its earlier iteration, these were pretty rough. You had static shots, many of the same emotes recycled, and you had a very boring utilitarian presentation with a camera that was mostly locked. The developers experimented around in a comedic relief side quest in order to see what they could do with the engine and how they could present a story, which is a trend that continues to this day and is actually one of the pretty cool things about this game. The end result was that even the main story saw its cutscenes really improve in terms of what they were doing with the camera. They got to be honestly, genuinely engaging and a lot of fun. But that really doesn't matter if the new guy is entirely too lazy to animate his script. Dawntrail sees the camera locked most of the time in static shot reverse shots. There are a bunch of simple pans and simple zooms, but it never really gets more complicated than that. It's not like the team forgot how to make a compelling presentation. It's not like they lacked the documentation on how to do it. They just didn't feel like doing it because the new guy in charge was, I don't know, lazy? And that brings me back to the other question. How did people that uninterested and that unmotivated to work in the properties that they were, writing for, wind up in the lead writers' chairs? Shouldn't someone have realized that they were unfit for the role before they got put in charge of a project with a budget in the millions of dollars? And I think the answer to that conundrum is actually pretty simple. Business idiots. I first heard this term as coined by Ed Zitron of the Better Offline podcast, who defines it with a few clear tenets. Think of the business idiot as a kind of con artist, except the con has become the standard way of doing business for an alarmingly large part of society. The business idiot thrives on alienation, on distancing themselves from the customer and the thing that they consume. The business idiot is the manager that doesn't seem to do anything but keeps being promoted. They're absolutely everywhere and they creep into every single industry at every single level. I have a personal theory that these kinds of people are exactly why we have business cycles. Once we arrive at a critical mass of them, companies start making extremely stupid decisions repeatedly. There are tons of big splashy examples of business idiots to look at. Concord is probably my favorite one because you have a development team full of people with absolutely zero idea of what they're doing. I mean, seriously, look at these character designs, and if you don't know about the story of the professor, well, you really should learn. Remember when Yahoo purchased Tumblr for $1 billion because Marissa Mayer insisted it was a much better buy than Netflix? Or when SoftBank hadn't yet realized that Masayoshi Son was maybe not giving the best advice when he pressed the company to invest $10 billion into WeWork, a temporary office space rental company? It's still weird to think that happened. Don't worry though, both Meyer and Son are highly paid executives in the AI industry, so, they're doing okay. Wait, why am I putting Baldur's Gate 4? Why would I bring that up? Anyways, good management is what deters business idiots. When you spy an employee that's doing basically nothing, what do? Well, you get rid of that useless baggage. You make sure that you're only hiring competent and engaged people who won't be an active detriment to your business. You reward and you empower the people who are actually doing good work, rather than rewarding the people who spend all day engrossed in office politics, turning in absolute trash. This just doesn't tend to be compatible with corporate structure, at least not in the long term. Sure, for a while, you might get team leads who know what they're doing and who know how to run a tight shop. But sooner or later, they're going to retire, they're going to leave the company, maybe they'll join a different team, and someone outside of that team is going to make a decision on who to promote within it. And even if they do wind up promoting someone from within the team, well, just because you're a good programmer or artist or writer doesn't mean that you're a good leader. They're separate sets of skills, even though most corporations seem really desperate to gainsay that obvious truth, probably because the business idiots in the C-suite are wildly antisocial, and so, of course, they don't have any leadership skills. They probably don't even have any gamer skills.
Anyone spamming the chat? Let me get...
So when you get someone in there who isn't exactly the greatest fit for the leadership role, they might unknowingly let a business idiot in. And that one idiot is going to fester and multiply till you arrive at the point that I think most AAA studios are at today. You have a core group of people who are damn good at what they do, and then, waiting in the wings, is an absolute horde of utterly incompetent, unfit, useless morons. It really only takes one business idiot to squander the hard work of everyone else involved in the project. And in the case of these two games, well, the faces of the games fit that bill. The characters Traash and Wut Lmao. These two characters have almost single-handedly imperiled these two franchises. Traash is a character that got a lot of attention because, well, Dragonage the Veilguard released during an election year, and it released 5 days before the election itself, and it featured a prominent non-binary character which thrust it into the culture war at its genuine hottest point.
So, I'm non-binary. What does that mean?
But even overlooking the atrocious release timing, this character is really awful. Being non-binary doesn't really make sense within the setting, and it doubly so doesn't make any sense for the Canary, a prominent culture whose unusual relationship to gender has already been established and explored in previous entries.
I understood Kunari women did not fight.
If a Kunari woman really wants to fight and has a gift for it, she becomes an Akunath-lak. The Akunath-lak joins the warriors and is treated like a male. He becomes a guy, for all intents and purposes.
But she wouldn't physically become male, surely.
Doesn't matter. In the Qun, your role is everything.
fiction is a great place to prod at, that kind of topic, these kinds of ideas, but you have to respect your setting and you have to make whatever you want to explore make sense within the universe that it exists in. Dragon Age already did this before, In Inquisition, Dorian's father doesn't like the fact that he's gay, and so his father tries to use actual wackadoo crazy blood magic to turn his son into his daughter. Isn't that kind of an interesting concept to chew on? It's sort of like a Star Trek conundrum.
But these people, if they don't know anything about... What I mean is, they don't seem to have any natural... how is it done?
Would you mind being careful where you throw your rocks, Mr. Spy?
Obviously, highly unstable gift.
Tosh is none of that. Tosh doesn't make any sense in the universe. It's like a bourgeois teenager who loves Joss Whedon quips and hates their stupid mom, poured out their angst into a DeviantArt story, and then someone greenlit them to write a character companion quest for Dragon Age 4, to write a companion altogether, frankly. The business idiot that wrote this character is the game's lead writer. Ooh. Still, I think Dawntrail had the bigger own goal, ultimately. See, Final Fantasy XIV has a weird relationship with voice acting. A Realm Reborn, which was the reboot of its abysmal first iteration, had US-based voice acting, and it is very bad.
Well met, friend. My name is Minthelia, and I lead the Scions of the Seventh Dawn.
Inconsistent recording setups and volumes, actors that really do always sound like they're talking right past each other, generally genuinely poor performances.
What chance have we against such an ungodly creation?
At least Bobobo put in some good work.
What exactly did you hope to accomplish here this day?
The answer man's here. It's... it's eggplant! Just kidding.
Well, I guess once A Realm Reborn didn't bomb, Square Enix decided to splurge a little bit to improve the voice work. They hired a UK-based studio, and oh my goodness, suddenly the game had genuinely professional-sounding recordings and performances that elevated the story and its characters so tremendously.
The dawn's light will shine again.
The studio kept pumping out hits and kept getting better at these roles for the next 3 expansions. Boom, boom, boom. And yet, for some weird reason, in Dawntrail, somebody insisted that, quote, more authentic voices, end quote, were needed. And that necessitated bringing on a US studio in order to voice a lot of the new cast. Final Fantasy XIV draws from a lot of cultures in the real world in order to inform its setting, and Dawntrail was to take place on a continent that incorporates Mesoamerican and Latin American influences. Of course, what ultimately came out was that those cultures are nothing more than tacos, alpaca, and mezcal, so I guess that's pretty cool. Anyways, the voice studio that Square Enix contracted this new work out to was not good. It was US based, and it was really bad.
I don't give a shit about your evidence, you lying scum. You release my friends, or I'll make you wish you had.
Dude, you could pick up literally anyone off the street and get this performance. I don't give a shit about your evidence, you lying scum. You release my friends, or I'll make you wish you had.
Yeah, like there's somebody's grandpa, and his performance is, it's fun, it's campy, I actually enjoy it.
Though not quite to the original script, your new Dawn servant rises.
But then you've got this guy, who despite being capable of exactly one melodramatic anime voice, he does the exact same voice for 8 other characters.
Through embracing innovation, not adhering to tradition, we will usher Tuliola onto a more prosperous victorious.
All of that is so much worse with Wut Lmao. Here's some of my favorites.
What happened? What good is a vow of resolve who cannot save her people? And then, though the people grieved their queen's tragic passing, and guided by her legacy of art, I am killed.
If you were wondering, no, I somehow don't think that this voice actor is an authentic representation, either of Mesoamerican or Latin American culture. The bizarre accent, I genuinely do not know what it's supposed to be. The fact that it's dropped every third or fourth line, like...
My name is Wut Lmao, and I've come to talk to Gululja. A meal. Here. I hate to turn down food, but I'd prefer to have this conversation in the back room.
Can we be real for a moment? Wut Lmao, this voice actor, this was a nepotism hire. This is someone consummately unfit for and incapable of the role, whose poor performance was repeatedly and pointedly overlooked throughout the years-long development of this game. It is inexcusable that this take made it into the release version of the game, and it was in the game for months and months, just like this, every single time you did this boss.
But if there's truly no other way to resolve this, then face me, not as a machine, but as the real you.
Lamachi.
This is not the result of your garden variety, oh, they're incompetent. This only could possibly happen with willful and purposeful negligence. One business idiot crawled up to a point where they could make an important decision, and they loaded up the production with the baggage of another voice acting studio, which seriously damaged the quality of the end product, all so that they could get their friend a job. By bringing on a second studio, the team had to get all this voice work done between 2 different time zones, 3 if you count Japan itself. You've got inconsistent recording setups that you should be trying to balance out in the final mix. Not that the team tried. You have no quality control or input whatsoever on what the new team puts out.
Well, where have you been all these years? What have you been doing with yourself?
And maybe worse than even any of that, you lose all of the ability to have your actors rehearse face-to-face on a soundstage in order to get more intricate and more communal understanding of the characters. That's how you get performances that are like this.
We'll take care of them. Don't worry. And we will never forget the Endless. Neither them, nor the time we spent with you. So be free of your burdens, Sphene. And sleep well.
Instead of performances that are like this.
Remember. Remember us. Remember that we once lived.
And that's the damage that just a few business idiots in a few positions of power can do to your game, can do to your company. It's hardly as if those 2 characters were the only things dragging their games down, but they were certainly the most prominent examples of a more widespread ineptitude that crisscrossed the entire production process. Dragonage has been basically binned as a series for how badly Veilguard failed, and BioWare itself is honestly probably up for the chopping block. Dawntrail has made Final Fantasy XIV's subscription count backslide to levels not seen since 2019, and if the next expansion that comes out is anything but stellar, this game could enter into a real death spiral. why would anyone come back? I think a lot of people might expect that as the old guard cycles out of a creative studio, the new guard coming in will experiment, will try new things, and will bring in the same creative fervor that the people exiting once had. That despite the fact that there will be a presence of business idiots, amidst those morons, you're still going to get at least some passionate and enthusiastic creatives. But why would talented people go into an industry where they're going to have to do the work of a bunch of clueless, talentless socialites in addition to their own work? An industry where those absolutely useless idiots cause shortfall after shortfall that lead repeatedly to crunch. Crunch which falls primarily on the people who are actually willing to do work. To kind of put a feather in this idea, who is the kind of person who wants to work at Blizzard Entertainment today? Does this look like it was made by a team of people who are all really putting in effort, really trying their best? The ballooning size of game budgets have made even AA studios a little bit too bloated, a little bit too big, a little bit too stultifying to really attract a lot of the up-and-coming talent. I think the next generation of actually enthusiastic and hardworking game devs, they're all trying to get in on the indie space first and foremost. I mean, you don't have to cover for idiots. Your teams are going to be small enough that you can spot and summarily eject slackers right away. You don't have to constantly grovel before publishers for funding, and you can experiment and you can try new things. Indie projects can take shape in places where the cost of living isn't absolutely ridiculous for no reason. And if you knock it out of the park, they can be just as good of an in into the industry as would be doing grunt work for some of the more established companies. Just look at Toby Fox and Undertale. Maybe, honestly, you just carve out your niche and stick with it. Tailworlds Entertainment has been making games out of turkey since like 2005, and they seem perfectly content to just keep pumping out the Mountain Blade series. The Lisa guy seems perfectly happy just making games and lifting weights. Silksong is only, the most anticipated game of this year? I'm sure some people have the ambition of a Hideo Kojima. You know, those uncompromising artistic visionaries that simply have to have AAA funding behind them to ever realize their goals and dreams and ideas. But I think by and large, the industry is undergoing something of a generational sea change, and it's just taking a little while for these corporate entities to realize it. In order to attract the type of talent that they used to get, they're going to need to change their structure, their compensation, and most importantly, they're going to need to clean house. You cannot use business idiots productively for anything. And so it's pretty impossible to make a good game if most of the people working on it are business idiots. And hard workers are getting more and more exhausted of covering up for the human equivalent of slop. Dragonage and Final Fantasy XIV aren't the first franchises where the new generation dropped the ball, and they certainly aren't going to be the last either. But as entertaining as their particular failures are, the twisted roots that caused them seem to me to be endemic within the AAA games industry. Which is to say, I think there's going to be a lot more beloved series, settings, and characters who are going to get this exact treatment.
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
The bizarre political aspect of Veilguard probably isn't going to happen again, but the same ineptitude is just going to take a different form. And while Final Fantasy XIV could correct its course, almost everything that they've done for the last few years really hasn't given me any hope. You should be prepared to leave behind the franchises that you love. Yeah, I mean, it sucks, plot threads left dangling, all that potential wasted, but the fun you had before, well, it will always have been there. You've always had it. You know, in the moment, you enjoyed things. Does True Detective Season 2 mean that you didn't enjoy Season 1? Does iDub Season 2 mean you didn't enjoy iDub Season 1?
I'm stoic.
At some point, well, you just gotta move on.
As ether obeys the cycle, as death and decay gives way to new life, so too do the memories we share inspire others to rise to greatness. For we who walk before may lead those who walk after. Your road goes ever on, as does your story, as does your legacy. Such is the hero's lot, to touch the lives of countless others.
What of you, my mirror? Born into this world, bestowed name, bid to seek out strife and adventure. Did you find fulfillment?